Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Rock That Relationship. We are here again talking about divorce. This is such an interesting season that we have. We've been able to really explore a number of things around divorce, and we're pleased to be here today with Judith Kaluzny, who is a retired lawyer and mediator and now a current writer who's going to be talking with us a little bit about the Marriage License Handbook. And so we'll just jump right into it, Judith. We're so glad you're here. Start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Oh, well, back in the day when I was going through divorce, and the judge told me there wasn't enough money to go around, so I had to go to work. I had 7 children.
Wow, 7.
That wasn't considered work.
Wow.
Wow.
That was the 70s.
Wow.
Anyway, a carpooler was a lawyer, and she told me I could go to law school. And I did that without a college degree. So, and then I, excuse me, after 20 or so years of litigating divorces, I was asked by a friend to be her attorney consultant, and she became a mediator. And so I started just being a consultant. Then I started sitting in the mediation, and then I really liked it. I took mediation training and I quit the courthouse business.
Wow.
So, yeah. And anyway.
So did how long ago did you leave the courthouse and do mediation? And then are you still doing any mediation? I mean, I know you're kind of retired from it.
It was like I was in the law business for 43 years.
Wow. And
it was just before the pandemic hit when I decided to close the office. So it was like in August, I notified all my clients that I would be leaving at the end of the year. Let's finish up. And so I quit in January, and we had the pandemic in March?
Mm-hmm.
It was just, really fortunate and good karma.
Wow. Well, and did you write, you have a book, right? The Marriage License Handbook. Did you write that then during the pandemic, or can you tell us about that?
Yes. Well, at least 30 years ago, it came to me that family law divorces are completely illogical. And I started thinking of a way to do a logical separation and divorce. And so what I had in mind, that's when I started the Safe and Sane Divorce Project. And that the Safe and Sane Divorce Project is still, website is still online, so you could read a lot of what I had in mind. And anyway, so I thought, well, nobody else would join with me in that project. I would talk to lawyers about it, and they all agreed that the court process was terrible. But if I wanted to talk about doing something else, they all shied away. There's big money in divorce.
Yeah, there is.
And so anyway, during the course of a lot of divorces and mediation, I found that there were people that hadn't quite understood community property, separate property, and such. Plus, I was inspired by Michael Pollan's experience in getting a hunting license. And he had to take a 14-hour class and a 100-question quiz to get a hunting license. And I thought, and to get a driver's license, you have to take the road test, the eye test, the written test. To get a marriage license, where were your mother and father born, and give me $56.
Yep.
So I decided that we needed a handbook and a test for a marriage license. And so it was fun writing it. And I included a test at the back of the book.
Well, I just ordered it on Amazon while you were talking, so I'm going to read it on my upcoming trip because I am a divorce attorney right now, and I've been a mediator, and it's my first time litigating in family law. And while there are some cases that clearly need litigation to protect, children and one spouse, I think the vast majority shouldn't be litigated.
Yes. In my research, I'm writing my real book now. This one, the Marriage License Handbook, was fun and an introduction to being a published author. And I'm writing The American Way of Divorce, titled A Fraud on Families.
Wow. When do you think that will be out?
I'm not too sure. I'm researching, and I've done a couple of query letters to agents.
And why is that? Why do you say a fraud on families? Yeah.
Because I read the California Judicial Council. Those are the people that run the courts, and they publish statistics every year. And I read the divorce statistics that this one year there were 365,000 divorces that were completed in the state of California. Mm-hmm. And then they went on to say, of those completed, 1,630 were completed with a trial in front of a judge. And, there aren't that many people that know about mediation.
Right.
So the rest of them, I say it's trial by carborundum. You get so many hearings and continuances, motions and interrogatories and depositions that you wear people down.
Right.
Absolutely. I want to tell you my favorite story about the contrast of mediation versus litigation. I had one couple came to me in February, and they had one house, 2 pensions, 3 kids, and support for a stay-at-home dad. And before the end of April, they were completely divorced. Everything returned from the court.
Wow.
And then I had another man that came, lived across the street, saw my sign, and he wanted to mediate the rest of his divorce. His wife had hired a lawyer who was a very nice lawyer, because the first thing she did was sit them down to work out a parenting plan. But they had a lot of investments and real estate. So he wanted to mediate the rest of it. And I couldn't contact her because she already had a lawyer. So I wrote him a proposal as to how to finish the divorce, including how to neutrally hire a certified divorce financial advisor. Mm-hmm. And he was going to pay all the expenses plus support, which was a total of $10,000 a month. And so apparently she was offended by this proposal. She fired her nice lawyer. She hired the number one shark of Orange County. And 4 years, $429,000 in attorney's fees.
Oh my God.
5 court appearances.
Wow.
2 days spent in alternate lawyers' offices negotiating. The 2 of them went to a coffee shop
and figured it out.
And spent a night and wrote their own agreement.
Yep. Okay, this is what I say about divorce. Either one really angry person or one really angry lawyer can just make it so much more complicated than it has to be. And I'm more than 90% of my cases settle, out of court, and that's my goal always. And
my understanding is, in my research on my next book, is that 3.8% of divorces involve a high conflict person. Now, the high conflict person needs a structured, litigated, a judge, a controlling atmosphere. The other people should be mediated. Oh, I want to tell you that, custody became a big thing in California after we went to no fault. I remember talking to an old lawyer, and he says people never bothered about custody before no fault. And I figured that was because with fault divorce, if you could prove the other one was the bad person, you could get more money and more property. And then with no fault, that's irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
But suddenly it was discovered that all that was relevant for custody.
Mm.
And secondly, state of California has put a price on your child's head. How much you pay or receive in support depends on how much time you spend with your kids.
Right. So it becomes this fight for 50-50, whether that's reasonable or not, 50-50 time with the children. In a lot of cases, that's just not reasonable for both parties. Right. And yet my experience is these certain partners, predominantly men, will fight for 50-50, even though they don't really have that time to give. But it's because they don't want to pay child support.
Right. And that's, I want to tell you a wonderful development in the field of divorce, and that is in the state of Utah. As of last September, their family law says if you have children, you cannot file for divorce until you have a written parenting plan.
Well, couldn't that trap a lot of people, though? That need to get away out of an abusive relationship?
Oh, no. Because the online, they have a lot of forms and instruction and help. And then they offer free mediation to help you if you need it. Mm. And then if you still can't get it done, the judge will write one for you.
Interesting. Okay.
So it doesn't change anything about restraining orders for domestic violence.
Okay.
But I thought, that's a great thing. But custody is big business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're talking about all these statistics, and I mean, they are mind blowing, right? And all these people, all these divorces are happening, all these marriages are happening. People who are getting divorced, some of them go sometimes even very shortly into a new marriage, right? Even people who came out of messy divorces. I mean, my mother was a different case. My parents had a very messy divorce, and she said, I'm absolutely never getting married again. And she repartnered for like 20 something years with someone and would never marry him because she had such a traumatic experience. But some people go right into yet another marriage, thinking maybe this is it. It's not going to be as bad. And then here they are 7 years later in the same situation. Tracy sees this with second marriages or third marriages with people. Well, can you talk a little bit about, why some of these like second and third and fourth marriages might end up more likely to end up in divorce?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I could say, does anybody remember the actress Shelley Winters?
Yes.
Her advice was, whenever you want to marry someone, go have lunch with his ex-wife.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
And then there are fewer divorces these days. And part of the reason I think is because there are fewer marriages.
Mm-hmm.
People are becoming more comfortable with living together without marriage. And in my book, I do address, in the marriage license book, I do address that as to that agreements are appropriate for living together as well.
Right. Well, I was going to say that because when Corey referenced her mother, because she wasn't married to her second partner, long-term partner, she lost out on some benefits and was kind of screwed over by some people because she wasn't married, right? So I think if you're going to enter into a long-term partnership, you should still have like your documents drawn up, right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
A written agreement.
Yes.
And
notarized.
Well, technically, a contract needs two signatures and and signed and dated, and that's a good contract. I would say if an agreement has to do with credit and separation, I advised. I did a mediation for one couple that husband was very nervous about wife's spending habits, and he didn't want a divorce. He still loved her, but still he wanted some control. So I mediated a settlement for them where we separated their finances, and I told them, you file this with the county clerk because his official notice to all creditors that these are not community debts, anything that she charges. And
that's called a postnuptial and so important, right? We keep talking about this like So I watch Love is Blind, the TV show on Netflix, love it. And, they fall in love, and I'm totally down for that, like falling in love in a pod because you're talking to the person for hours on end. But then they actually go get legally married. I have no problem with that, but like one woman brought up a prenup and the guy and his family freaked out. And I'm like, what? How could you freak out? Like, this is a legal contract. This is something you need to protect yourself over. And I find it interesting. People get very riled up about prenups and postnups, if they even know what they are.
Well, the thing is that marriage is a contract.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do not write your own contract, the state has a default contract for you.
Mm-hmm.
So a premarital agreement, if premarital sounds better than prenup,
mm-hmm.
you're altering the state contract. And it doesn't have to just include, it's not about who owns what. It's supposing that one of them is going to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
And what about credit for the later earnings?
Mm-hmm.
If you're spending money putting somebody through school, is there compensation? Or if one party is staying at home with children or will stay at home with children, how do you compensate that person for being out of the workforce?
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of things.
Yeah, well, that is interesting because what I've seen is people do have these agreements, just verbal, in their marriage. Okay, you'll take care of the kids and whatnot. And then when they go to get divorced, the viciousness with which they suddenly, attack this person, like you're lazy, you stayed at home, you didn't do anything, you didn't work. I have one case where the man is making like $180,000. That's like $15,000 a month. And she's homeschooling their kids. And now he's like, get out of the house. And, she has to move out because they did something called the what is that called? The deed that, I can't think of it right now.
Joint property.
No, it's not. It only ends up being one person. That's something I've seen in multiple cases. You guys talk, I'm going to figure that out. But basically, I've seen it done several times, and people are like, oh, we have to get approved for this house, so your credit sucks or whatever, so you're going to sign this.
Oh, right.
God, I can't think of the name. Okay, but the person signs away basically the rights to their own house, and only the one spouse gets it. And what happens is they still can get the equity when they are divorcing, but they have to move out. They have to leave, and the other spouse is the only one who has the right to the property. I'm going to look that up right now. You guys talk.
Just to say, verbal agreements, as the old saying says, are not worth the paper they're written on.
Mm-hmm.
So, with today's complicated lives, what's the big deal about, right? You don't necessarily even have to go to a lawyer to write your agreements regarding.
Mm-hmm.
You could, the essential thing is that it's signed and dated and that it's clear and understandable what your intention is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, when you were talking about the agreements, even when you're not married, I was living with a partner. We were together for 7 years, and we did a cohabitation agreement, which was all the things that we agreed to living together, and we signed it. And just the process of having that conversation helped us get on the same page as to what our expectations were. And then when we split up, we knew things. Like one of us was on the other person's cell phone plan, and we said, you have a 30-day transfer time in which I'm not going to turn your number off, but you have 30 days to get your own plan, and who gets the pet and all of these things. And it was so much easier when we split up because we just followed this, and so it really was helpful. But I also like the pre-part of it, which was the discussions that we had ahead of time, things I would never have thought about, like really who is going to get the pet? Like, did we really think that through? And forcing us to have that conversation was really helpful.
Yeah, here's some of the things I have noted in my book about community versus separate property and how to change one. You can change community to separate. You can change separate to community. And how to compensate for the career of the others, like books or whatever. Mm-hmm. A plan, like if it's a new marriage and you're thinking you're going to have children, maybe a plan for joint parenting. And maybe even in your premarital agreement, how to resolve problems if you get into a major disagreement, and perhaps write in a process of finding a mediator or a therapist to help solve problems. And then I also have a section on a marriage readiness test, and to analyze, why are you getting married? Is it pregnancy? Is it lust? Is it an obligation or religion? And then your finances. Do you intend to share everything? Does one earn significantly more than other? And how do you want to make financial decisions? Jointly, separately? What?
See, that's so smart. We've talked about it's like basically doing that, counseling prior to, like, everybody should be handed your book on their way out of high school.
Yes, that's what I tell people. That's what I tell
here's your high school graduation present. Now think about your future carefully, because it costs, in Arizona now, it's $98 to get married, and it's probably $10,000 to $15,000 to get divorced if there's any contention. And by the way, I came up with a disclaimer deed. People will sign a disclaimer deed while they're, getting financing for their house, and usually it's the one person who gets, it's usually the woman, like, oh, are my credits better? Let's put a disclaimer deed. People, ladies, when you sign a disclaimer deed for the home you're about to live in, that means you have no right to it when you're divorcing. And you have an equity right, but you won't have the right to keep the house whatsoever. You will have to leave. And people are completely shocked when they find out what a disclaimer deed means, because when they're doing it, whoever's helping them do it is downplaying the effects of it. It's very wicked.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. People don't understand what they're signing when they sign a disclaimer deed. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
Well, and Judith, it seems like your book, like a lot of those questions you have in there, a lot of people don't even think about. And I almost think too, like, we talk about giving them to people before marriage. I mean, it could be incredibly useful even for people who are married, right? And say, these are conversations we haven't had. Maybe we have them now.
Yes, I one friend of mine who's been married 38 years said she and her husband had great fun together reading it, and they had even more fun with the test.
Wow,
that's great.
And I tell people, like, say if I'm at I've done wedding expos for marketing the book, and maybe the parents come by and say, well, we're happily married, and I said, yeah, but how about graduation gifts, high school, college.
Yeah, I think even if you're happily married, when your friends said they had great fun, were they being sarcastic or were they serious?
No, she was serious. Yeah, they really enjoyed it.
And that's after 38 years of marriage. And I have to say, when I have clients who are getting married after 30 plus years or even 25, it's like a stab to my heart. I'm like, oh my God, because the longest relationship I've had is 8 years and then 14 years with a border collie. But I'm like, if you could make it 25 years or 30 years, what the heck? What happened? And people do change, but it's like, my gosh, you don't know. Just because you've made it 30 years or whatever doesn't mean that that's going to continue. And so I think those things are so important. And it's so important to have these discussions and take care of the stuff while you're getting along.
Yeah, there's I had many mediation clients that were married 15 or 17 years. And they felt, especially the wife, felt uncomfortable with asking for a divorce because there was no serious problem that she could identify. And I say, good health. Somebody says, what causes divorce? I said, good health.
Like choosing their own happiness?
No. In the olden days, marriages didn't last that long for most people. There was
people died.
Malaria, smallpox, what's that lung disease?
Tuberculosis,
industrial accidents, farm accidents, and of course,
so true.
Of course, childbirth.
Right.
And so nowadays, let's say you get to be 50 years old and you've been married 25 years, and the kids are off to college. And you know you're going to live at least another 25 years. And you're sitting at the breakfast table and you look across the table and you think, 25 more years. I mean, if people don't take or take care or realize that you can grow and change in different ways.
Right.
And if there's not any unity in that while you're aging,
right,
then you will suddenly come to a realization, he's here, I'm there.
Right.
And I don't think I must admit, somebody in 1974 wrote a book called The American Way of Divorce. But this woman, she had 35 pages of citations. So this was not written for the common market. It was academics. But her thing was that we should not make divorce be a social crime.
Right. That's what we talk about. It's not a failure. It's a choice. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's not a failure. I mean, anyway, life is long, and it's a lot longer than it used to be.
Yeah. 100 years ago, we'd all be kicking the bucket soon.
Right.
You know?
So, yeah. And there's remember Katharine Hepburn?
Yes.
Her views were that she thought that wondered if men and women really suit each other. She says perhaps they should just live next door and visit now and then.
Well, as lesbians, we agree with that. I mean,
we talked about the duplex. We talk about the duplex as the best living arrangement with a partner. Right. You can knock on the door, but you can go home at night and not have their mess in your space.
But I always say to my straight friends, because back in the day I used to do gay educating back in the 90s, and people would be, oh, I'm so sorry for you, you're a lesbian. I'm like, why? I'm ecstatic. And I'm not attracted to people I don't really not get along with. And all my straight friends are not all of them, I shouldn't say all of them, but men and women are very different. So it's interesting that they're attracted to each other, and then their lifestyle choices can be radically different.
Oh, speaking of difference, I'm currently reading this fantastic book, Eve. Have you heard?
No,
It's Evolution of a Woman, Women Only, by Cat Bohannon, and it's just incredible how breasts evolved, starting with a teeny little mouse-like critter that was no bigger than a thumb that lived among the feet of the dinosaurs, that was exuding milk from her abdomen without nipples. And anyway, and how that evolved. And then her next chapter is the womb, how the womb evolved, and so forth. Her last chapter is love. So I'm still in the womb chapter.
Oh my gosh, I'll have to check it out. We'll put it in the show notes for our listeners who are super curious about this book.
Yeah, Eve.
All right. And so, okay, we know you're writing your new book. That's going to come out. Are you working now? Are you working with clients, or are you kind of, that over for you? Okay.
That's over. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the other thing about, my website from when I was a mediator is still up too, JudithKaluzny.com. And I have a lot of writings on there about mediation and divorce and, getting separated and so forth. So,
well, that's helpful. We'll put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so after you did this for years, decades and decades, you talked about the 70s. What are your main takeaways, marriage and divorce?
Well, like I say, my main takeaways on marriage is it's a contract, and you can change the state contract. There is a fiduciary relationship part of marriage, and that means highest good faith and fair dealing. And I talk about that. And if it's a second marriage, I say, consider your present life and how it might or might not change. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said, it's important to have unconditional love, but it should include not just others, but yourself. Expecting that an attorney is going to save your life for you in a divorce is not realistic. It's your life. And I represented a lot of battered women, and I would tell them, it's your life. I'm your tool to help you. We can do the best we can, but it's your life. Mm-hmm. So that's the key thing about divorce. It's you have to take care to pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, yeah, the conflict is the worst part of it. And the big deal these days on conflict and divorce is considering the effect on the children. There's a website, there's a organization in Marin County, Center for Judicial Excellence, that since 2008 has been tracking filicide, children who are murdered by a parent going through divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And they track it in every state. And since 2008, there's been near 1,000 children murdered by a parent.
Doesn't surprise me. And I have a client whose former husband killed 6 people trying to get to her and her son. So and I was a police officer before. So these are things that people don't like to talk about, and they act shocked, but they're happening all around us. I mean, just watch, true crime.
And the other thing is just plain conflict. One judge came to the family law and the probate lawyers to advise on ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how the stress on the parents going through court affects children, especially the young ones. It permanently damages their minds. ACE is a big area of research these days. But what could he tell these lawyers except be nice out there? As you said before, if one lawyer is a shark, and what are you going to do? You're stuck, and it affects your children. Their little developing brains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So is it more the divorce process that's affecting the children, or the fact that the parents are separating?
Oh, it's not the separation. It's the fact that in my area, you go to court for temporary orders when you start a divorce. And this one young man that was working for me, he went to court 5 times, continued 4 times, just to get a simple parenting plan started. And think of that. You go to court, you have to take off of work, take care of the child care. One woman wrote up a big thing for me that she actually got fired because of all the time she had to take off work to go to court. And these were continuances, not actual court hearings.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like from what you're talking about is, all of these things kind of in summation is that these divorce processes are just toxic. And the more we can move away from them to have pre-agreements of sorts, or mediation, or things that are, a lot more kind of, respectful, kind, meet at the coffee shop kind of things, if that's possible, is just going to have less impact on the people getting divorced and their children in general.
Well, and I want to say paying attention to red flags before you get involved in this situation, because I have so many clients who they saw the red flags and they continued forward, and it is to their peril.
Okay, the National Center for State Courts is working on a plan that starts, and this is what I wrote 30 years ago. You start with a triage. I say take it out of the court system, have a family services center, and the first thing you go through a triage, and then if it's determined that there's a high conflict problem, that divorce gets shunted off into a more controlled process, but the rest get mediated, and then you pay for the services that you need based on your estate. I mean, like one couple that forensic accountant told me about had a trial in court every Friday for 5 years. We're paying for that nonsense, and they paid one filing fee for their divorce.
Right.
And
and a self-represented client can really wreak havoc on people because they don't care.
Yeah,
going through that right now with the termination.
And listen, this will never change by legislation alone. We need. My hope is to motivate civic organizations like women's clubs and Rotaries and such to be outraged at what's going on and demand that their legislators change it. Because if we leave it to legislation only, it'll not happen.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Judith, this has been a really fascinating conversation. Oh, my goodness. And you have such great resources available. We'll put those in the show notes, and we'll put a link to your book there. And, super excited about, hearing about your new book, and, definitely try to connect with you once that book is out. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about that, because I'm super fascinated about it.
All right. As I always say, onward.
Onward. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for being on, Tracy. Thanks for the great conversation, too. And for all of our listeners out there, until our next episode, go out there and rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship, and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.